Hey everybody, this is Irma Brady with your Montage. Thank you so much for being here. It is July 7th, I think maybe month 4 of social distancing. So this is why we're doing a lot of events online. So thank you all for a ton of you who have joined us in person for our live events. So please excuse my quarantine hair. This is what you got today. Today is a very special day because not only do we interview a good buddy of mine from back in the day, but this is for charity. So please check out Equal Justice Initiative, EJI.org, and the Innocence Project, innocenceproject.org. Really great causes that you contribute to your donations to for today's chat. So please check them out. For those who are a fan of Just Mercy with Michael B. Jordan, that was based on the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, which is a great foundation. And also the Innocence Project, you can check their show out, Innocence Project, Innocence Files on Netflix rather. So yeah, before we get going, please check those out when you can. Andy, I think you're still muted.
Oh, sorry, there we go.
Here we go. But yeah, so your tickets will go towards them. But also folks, I want to remind you that before we get going, today is not a pitching session whatsoever. This is a great way to connect with somebody in the industry. So during the audience Q&A, please refrain from asking anything that will feel like a pitch. I think Andy would appreciate that. So we get going. Andy, it's great to have you. Fun fact for those who are just tuning in, I actually interned for Andy's company back in 2012. There's actually two companies, Mosaic Media Group and Alice Entertainments. And before we recorded, Andy kind of told us the difference between the two, but I was on the Mosaic side. So I've known Andy for about 8 years now. Fall of 2012 was when I ended my internship there. A little bit about Alice Entertainment and Andy. Andy Horwitz is a producer and executive vice president of Charles Roven's Alice Entertainment. Most recently, Horwitz served as producer on J.C. Chandor's Triple Frontier, starring Ben Affleck, Oscar Isaac, Charlie Hunnam, Garrett Hedlund, and Pedro Pascal, which was released theatrically by Netflix. Horwitz served as a co-producer on David Ayer's Suicide Squad, starring Will Smith, Margot Robbie, and Jared Leto. Coming up, Alice is releasing Wonder Woman 1984, a sequel to their successful film Wonder Woman, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad in 2021, and will begin production on Uncharted based on the successful PlayStation video game. Out now, you can catch Dirty John and Scoob. Other past films include the Dark Knight trilogy and the award-winning American Hustle. Please, everyone, give a silent round of applause to Andy Horwitz.
Thank
Great
you.
to see you, man. It's been I want to say 8 years since I've physically been in the Atlas office, and I love seeing behind you is a bunch of the not the awards, but the films you were part of. I see American Hustle back there.
Yeah. You'd be surprised. Atlas has changed a lot since you've been there. Since you were there, we've taken over the whole 10th floor actually, or most of the 10th floor. Because we've started 2 additional divisions, which is Atlas Artists, which is a talent representation management division, and then Atlas Lit, which is a lit division. So since you were there, we've now sort of absorbed the whole 10th floor at 9200 and have done a whole renovation. It's pretty amazing looking now.
Love it, man. And actually went to Mosaic last year. Check them out, see where they're at. They moved to Beverly Hills, I think. Or another part of Beverly Hills.
Yeah, they're right down the street. They've got great offices. Their offices are really nice.
Yeah, so it's great to catch up with you, man. Like I told everyone earlier, I'm gonna ask a few questions, but it's more about them because I actually already know you. But before we get started, I'm a big fan of learning people's quote unquote mailroom stories. You know, how you got started to where you are now. And it's great. You're EVP, Executive Vice President of Alice Entertainment, one of the biggest production companies today. So if you can briefly go over how you got started in the entertainment industry, why you chose this career path, because it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And how'd you landed a role as EVP?
Yeah, I'll sort of start at the beginning. I've been at Atlas for 13 and a half years now. And I think I've done just about every job there is to do at a production company. I grew up in Agora Hills, California, which is about 45 minutes outside of LA. And since I was a little kid, I've always wanted to be a producer. I've just always been sort of surrounded by the film business. When I was about 16 years old, I started PAing on music videos and commercials and reality TV shows. And graduated high school, didn't quite know where I wanted to go to film school. I've been a surfer my whole life, so decided I was going to go up to Santa Barbara City College and spend 2 years up there in a town that I really loved. And after I finished there, I got into a bunch of film schools. One of which was USC that my brother was just graduating from. And he told me at that point that, I don't think you're going to love living in downtown Los Angeles. You are a surfer, you love living by the beach. So I would recommend that you try to find a film school where you could sort of keep maintaining that kind of lifestyle that you've had for a long time. And secondary, the film business is sort of one of those few businesses where it doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't really matter where you went to college. You could have just gone to a city college. You could have gone to Harvard. We all start at the same level, regardless of what education you have, in my opinion. It's based on experience and not necessarily what school you went to. So I transferred at that point to a film school that was in Santa Barbara called the Brooks Institute of Photography. It was primarily a photography school, but when I started at the film school was pretty new. It was about 10 years old at that point. And so I loved it. It was a great film school. It allowed me to make a bunch of stuff, which is what I think the most important part of film school is. I think you can only learn so much in a classroom, but physically getting on a set and being out there doing it is the most important thing. So let me just stop my dog from scooting around.
I think we want to see the dog.
Yeah, they're all over the house at the moment. So when I was in film school, I sort of produced everyone's movies. I knew I wanted to be a producer, but I also knew that one of the most important things was, taking all of the classes. So I took editing and cinematography and screenwriting and directing, because a good producer should be able to do all of those things. You're going to have to understand. Sorry, my phone is ringing. Hold on a second. I don't know what's happened to my screen. There we go. Sorry. So, as I said, a good producer has to learn how to do all of those things. So I took all those classes. I produced everyone's films in film school. And by the time I graduated, I had a number of short films under my belt. And I also had a short film that premiered at Sundance. So I very naively thought to myself, the second I graduate and move down to Los Angeles, my phone will be ringing off the hook. Everyone's going to want to hire me. And this is going to be great. Here I go. And of course, lo and behold, I moved to Los Angeles. Not only did my phone not ring, but I literally couldn't get people to call me back. It was a very, very difficult time in my life in which I thought to myself, wow, I sort of naively thought, like, I'm going to graduate film school and I'm going to go off and produce movies. And that's it. I'm here. And it's definitely not that way. The film business is very, very difficult to get to where you want to be. So I thought to myself, okay, to get to where I want to be, I want to be producing big movies. I want to be producing event films. I want to go work for someone that does that. And so at that point, I started sending out resumes to all of the biggest producers in town to see if they were looking for assistants. Again, I couldn't even get myself an interview. I wasn't getting any calls. I never did an internship. All I had was sort of PA experience on set. When I was in film school, I was driving down to LA on the weekends and PAing on independent films and commercials and music videos. So I had a lot of production experience, but I didn't have any kind of experience working in an office. So at that point, I did what I recommend everyone do, which is reach out to somebody that's working in the film business and to see if they know someone that's hiring. So at that point, I reached out to a friend of mine I went to high school with. His name was Chris Osbrink, and he was working as the assistant to a director named Pete Siegel. And Pete Siegel at that time had done some of my favorite movies like, Tommy Boy and great films in the day. And he was prepping a film called Get Smart that a producer named Charles Roven was producing. So he got back to me and he said, I think our producer on Get Smart is looking for a second assistant. I'll give him your resume. So Atlas Entertainment was the very first interview that I got out of film school. It was about 3 months after I graduated. And I remember sitting in the lobby there, kind of wearing a shirt like this. I was 22 years old, and sort of looking around at the other people that were also interviewing for the job, thinking to myself, like, what are you doing here? They're going to laugh you out of this room. These guys were a lot older than me. They were wearing suits. They clearly had experience in the business. I had none of that. So, I got to a point where I just said, fuck it. This will be a comfortable interview because I know I'm not going to get this job. I interviewed with his assistants at that time who were doing the interview process. And I really honestly just sort of said yes to everything they asked me. Could you do this or have you done this? I said yes, even though at that point, I didn't even know what half the things were they were talking about. I didn't know what rolling calls meant. I had no office experience. And this was 2007. So Google was a thing, but it wasn't like it is today. So you couldn't really Google things the way you can today. But I knew that I was smart enough that if I got this job, I'll figure all this stuff out.
Right.
So I did the interview. I left. I go, okay, I got one under my belt. Hopefully more will come. And then a week later, I got a call saying, Chuck's in town. We told him about you. He wants to meet you. So I went and met him on like a Sunday. I think at that point, he was in prep on Get Smart, as I mentioned, The Dark Knight. And then he was in post-production on a movie called The Bank Job. So The Bank Job was posting in Australia. He was scouting the UK for The Dark Knight. He was prepping Get Smart in Los Angeles. So it was sort of the busiest he had been kind of at one time. And I could tell the last thing he wanted to be doing at that point was interviewing a second assistant. And he was exhausted, and it was on a Sunday. And, when I was going into his house to meet with him, there was another guy coming out. So I know I wasn't the only person up for the job. And he then spent about 45 minutes trying to explain to me why I didn't want the job. Why it would be my whole life and everything would be focused on him and Atlas and the movies that we were working on, and that, if I had a girlfriend, she would be upset, or if I had roommates, they would be upset, and my social life would be over as I knew it. And at that point in my life, that's sort of exactly what I wanted. I had the ability to do that at that point. I wasn't married then. I didn't have a girlfriend. I grew up in LA, so all my friends had sort of left LA, or some of them were still around. So it was the perfect timing. And sure enough, he hired me. And I was honestly shocked. I really was. I had no clue why he would want to hire someone that had absolutely no assistant experience outside of being a PA. But he did. And I'll never forget, when I was going to film school to sort of pay the bills, I was managing a video store called Salzer's Video in Ventura, California. And that's what I did for a few years while I was going to film school. So the reference that Charles Roven called was like my hippie stoner manager at Salzer's Video. And I'll never forget him telling me that he was going to call her and thinking, oh my God, like, this is going to be hilarious. Like, this guy talking to her about this job when I was managing a little video store in Ventura. So I got the job, and I started as a second assistant, and I knew immediately that I was in way over my head. I had no clue how stressful this was going to be, what it was going to entail. And I will say, though, I sort of loved it. I got to, as an assistant to a producer like that, you're listening to all of their phone calls, you're on the line, you're connecting calls, you're reading all of their emails. So you have to be integrated into their life and what they're doing at Atlas, or else you're not going to be able to do your job sufficiently. So for me, that was my grad school. I was sitting there on his desk learning how to produce the biggest movies in the world as a 23-year-old, and just sort of as a fly on the wall. And, it was an amazing experience. And about 3 months after I started as the second assistant, my first assistant and him weren't getting along very well. And he ended up firing my first assistant. So usually the path is usually a year or two as the second assistant, a year or two as the first assistant. And then if you're working out, you'll go somewhere from there. I ended up just sort of expediting my path. And so after 3 months, I became the first assistant. And I realized at that point that, now I'm the only assistant. And so everything goes through me, through all these movies that were now in production all over the world. And all of the things, the way that the desk was running and the operation was running was sort of a older way of doing things. It was the way sort of that people used to do things in the late 90s. We were still printing out every email that came and filing them in file folders, and it just wasn't efficient. So I knew that if I could change the whole operation to run more efficiently without Chuck even knowing about it, meaning that his daily job was the same, but everything was running more efficient in the office, it would be easier for me. So I changed everything. I became the only assistant, and I was in the office, every day from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, sometimes 5, 6, 7 days a week. I ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner at that desk. It was my whole life. And again, as I said, I sort of loved it. I was a part of The Dark Knight being made and all these amazing things that were happening. And about a little over a year and a half of being by myself, Chuck came in the office one day and just asked me, why haven't I hired myself a second assistant? So of course, I didn't realize that I was able to just go do that. So I called up my producing partner from film school, a guy by the name of Kurt Kanemoto, who was working in reality TV at that point, and asked him if he wanted to come work with me at Atlas. And of course he said yes, and he started working with me as my second assistant. And then about 8 months later, Chuck asked me to go to breakfast. And one of the things I forgot to mention is that when I started as the only assistant on his desk, he told me that if I could survive 2 years and go through this gauntlet of making all these movies with him at the same time, that he'll promote me at the company. And at that point, I was in the zone. And so I sort of lost track of time. And so after my second assistant had been with me for about 8 months, Chuck asked me to go to breakfast, and he sort of called me out and said, you didn't bring it up to me, but 2 weeks ago was 2 years to the day that I told you that if you're still here and you've lasted and we're getting along, that I'll promote you at the company. So that was in about 2009. And at that point, I became the first creative executive at Atlas. We didn't have any creative executives at that time. And, one of the things that Chuck did at that point when I became the first assistant, before I got promoted, was he gave me some light at the end of the tunnel, which I think is so important, to give people these goalposts that they can work towards, because Hollywood is so easy to get burnt out in. People work as a producer, especially a producer. It's not a 9 to 5. It's a 24/7 gig. You go home and you don't clock out. When you leave the office, your job doesn't stop.
Your phone's literally going off as we speak.
Yeah, it is actually.
Yeah.
So it's, Hollywood never stops. You could stop. You could say, I want to turn my phone off, or I want to do this, but then you'll get left behind, in my opinion. So you have to keep up. You have to always stay ahead of the curve. And so you can get burnt out really, really easily in this business. And, that light at the end of the tunnel was so important for me that by the time I got there, I realized, wow, I'm here. I'm an executive. I have my own office. Now what? I don't know. I don't know what. I now have to sort of create my own hours, and I have to find my own projects. And, it was a great, great experience, I will say. And the first project that I got as a creative executive at that time was called American Bullshit, which ended up turning into American Hustle. And, that was my first movie, crazy enough, that I sort of was on from just an idea all the way through selling it to a studio, through developing it to a screenplay, through taking it out of the studio to finding financing.
I think there was whispers about it in the office when I interned there. I was like, what's this American bullshit people talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then of course that movie came together in an incredible way. It was my first film that I was on from beginning, middle to end. And since then I've produced a number of films, and, became, from a creative executive, went to a vice president, to a senior vice president, to now an executive vice president. So I've done sort of PA work, to second assistant, to first assistant, to creative executive, to VP, senior VP, now EVP, and as a producer of the company. So I've sort of worked in every part of the business, and now here I am.
I know everyone's story is different, so we do appreciate you sharing that.
It is. I mean, my story is, I always tell everyone I tell them my story is very unique to me. Everyone's story is going to be unique to them. So the worst thing you could ever be doing in town, in my opinion, is comparing yourself to other people. All you're going to do is be disappointed because, oh, that person now got that. Now, why haven't I gotten there? And why haven't I gotten there? And every person's journey is completely unique to themselves. This business is about right time, right place, right experience, right opportunity. They all have to come together to get to where you want to be. And oftentimes it takes a lot of time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears to get to that point. So nothing in this business, in my opinion, is ever handed to you. It's everything that everyone has. Most people anyways, they've worked their asses off to get there.
Absolutely. We're lucky to have you, and we absolutely love your films. Love the company's films. American Hustle is great. Dark Knight Trilogy, you can't go wrong with that. Wonder Woman. I have a soft spot for Wonder Woman, of course. But I'm gonna turn over to the audience. So, folks, I'm gonna call on you to ask your question to Andy, and if you want to ask your question on camera, feel free to turn on your camera and yourself. But also, just as a reminder, try not to pitch anything to Andy, please. We're gonna go with Brendan, Melissa, Myron, then Dylan. I know there's a lot of questions in the queue. We'll try to get to as much as possible. It's Brendan, Melissa, Myron, and Dylan.
All right, hi, I'm Brendan. I was just wondering, who do you think is in a more healthy position during regular times, not during these times, like the studios or like streaming services like Netflix?
The streaming services have found a nice moment right now. Obviously, people don't need to leave their houses in order to, watch content, which is a great thing. I think, I always sort of naively thought that the film business in general, or the entertainment business, was sort of agnostic to recessions and what was happening in the world, because everyone they need an escape in the world, and escapes usually come through watching television or films. This is the first time I've never actually thought of a scenario in which we physically couldn't shoot anything anymore and physically couldn't put things in a theater anymore. That was so foreign to us. I don't think anyone ever expected a scenario where that was going to happen. But obviously, if you look at the Netflix stock, it's going crazy. And I think everyone knew, years ago that the future was going to be leaning more towards streaming. I don't think the theatrical business will ever go away. I think people are always going to want to go to the cinema and watch movies and have that theatrical experience, because I know I think it's very important. But, there's such a hunger for content these days that companies like Netflix and HBO Max and Hulu and Amazon and Apple, they're releasing some incredible content too. So I think they're having a nice moment. But do I think more people have signed up for those streaming services based on the pandemic? I don't think so. I think most of the people, at least domestically, that were going to be interested in watching Netflix shows probably already had a subscription. So in terms of them making more money during the pandemic, I don't know if that's the case, but I do know that people have definitely exhausted themselves with the content that are on the streaming services and are hungry for more. And I hope that we get to start making more soon.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brendan. Good to meet you, sir. Also, folks, reminder, don't try to ask questions where it asks for spoilers from Andy. So things coming up. So please no spoiler questions. Melissa, Myron, Dylan, Jermaine, Chris, Brian on deck. Melissa, you're up.
Hi, Dylan. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
You mean Andy?
Andy, yeah.
Not
Oh.
I'll be playing the part of Dylan for the remainder of the day.
Erman say Dylan and
yeah, no worries.
Sorry. So yeah, I've been acting for about 7 years now, and I'm a SAGMOS joint. I've been at for like 2 years now, and I've been at that point when I want to start getting my lead, co-star, star credits in TV and film, but it's been difficult without like having big credits yet on my resume. So what will be your best advice to start getting those credits? I know right now it's like a difficult time, but I'm trying to learn as much by the time we go back to the new normal,
Yeah, I mean, it's there's not really one way to do it. I think what I always tell people is just, so many people come to town, they try for a year or two, they realize it's hard, and they give up and they leave. Often people struggle for years. And as I said, it's right time, right place. You just never know when the right role is going to come up. For example, Karen Fukuhara, who played Katana in Suicide Squad, she had never been in anything before. I think she was doing interviews on red carpets for a Japanese language program. And that audition happened at the right time, at the right place, and she got that role, and she went from 0 to 100 so fast, from never being on a set really before to being on, $150 million movie of Suicide Squad. So she got that incredible experience, and now she's done amazingly well. She's super talented, and all it took was an experience like that for everyone to see how talented that she is. So I guess my biggest piece of advice would just be keep going. Eventually it will happen. You just have to keep grinding and pushing and going on auditions and putting yourself on tape, and eventually that right role will come where people will be able to see you and see the talent that you have. But it takes time, and I would just say that don't get frustrated and keep pushing, because it'll eventually happen.
Right, thank you. And to add to that, since you're talking about action films, I'm huge into just physical activity, period. So what would be your opinion about, really getting into the training of stunts and stage combat, but not being stunts and still being considered an actor?
Yeah, I mean, obviously stunt performers are part of SAG as well. So in my opinion, they're actors. They're performing. They're performing in significant ways a lot of the time. You don't get to see their face or hear their dialogue, but they are. They're such an important part of the puzzle, especially in action films. And a lot of actors, do make the transition from stunt performer to actor. I gotta say, like, when we have actors that are able to do their own stunts, where we can shoot the actor from the front and not from the back, meaning we get to watch their face do certain things. That's a great thing for us. And I know directors really appreciate it too. So it's not a bad way in, to be honest, by starting in the stunt performer world, learning those techniques, those experiences, getting yourself in that kind of shape, and then eventually making transition from stunts to fully acting in front of the camera, because in my opinion, they're both doing the same thing. The stunt performers just don't get the spotlight the way that the actors do, but a lot of the times they're responsible for so much of what you're seeing and what you're thinking the actors are doing. So it's a great way to get through there.
But you could also just start as an actor and add that in your resume. Like
100%. Yeah, it's always great to have that skill set, to always keep up your training, you know, to continue to stay in shape and be, you know, acquiring different skill sets and being able to do different things, because you never know what the role is going to call for. You know, the role might need someone who knows how to surf, you know, and then of course, if you're doing that, you can do that, or play a certain sport. So oftentimes you'd be surprised what kinds of skill sets we're looking for in actors and actresses that would get people the roles that normally they wouldn't have gotten if they didn't have that skill set.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Erwin.
Thank you, Melissa. Up next, we have Myron, Dylan, Jermaine, Chris. We have so many questions, Andy, so let's try to get through as much as possible. Myron, Dylan, Jermaine, Chris, then followed by Brian. Hey, Myron, you there?
Hey, Andy. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, my question is just a real quick one. I heard about your VR project, and I want to know what type of insights do you have when it comes to putting together those type of projects, considering that VR is something that is still fairly new.
Yeah, you know, at that point, we did that in 2015. So VR was even newer back then. I think at that point, you know, Samsung was just starting to release, you know, their wireless goggles where you plug your Samsung phone onto the goggles and you can have a VR experience. So that one came together in a really interesting way, in which, you know, when we're making these types of films like Suicide Squad, oftentimes we bring our promotional partners or people that want to be promotional partners to set to do set tours. And at that point, some of the reps from Samsung came as part of a big group, and they had pitched me this idea to put VR cameras on set. So sort of they wanted to do this kind of behind the scenes experience where you had cameras sort of sitting behind the director, and you get to sort of see behind the cameras and in front of the cameras and feel like you're on set. I heard that, and I thought to myself, you know, we could probably do something even cooler, because we had these incredible sequences in that movie. We also had the luxury of having a stunt coordinator, second unit director by the name of Guy Norris, who is probably one of the most talented guys in town. And he had just come off of Mad Max Fury Road, and his son, Harrison, was there as well. And his son heard this pitch happening and said, hey, we know VR really well. We've been looking forward to trying to do something in VR. So at that point, I said, you know, let's see if we can put this together. You know, we can shoot one of our action sequences in VR, and when the movie comes out, we can actually let, you know, audiences be one of these characters in the middle of an action sequence. It had never been done before, and so we had no clue if we were going to be able to pull it off, if it was going to work. And at that point, Warner Brothers obviously didn't want to spend money doing it. So I went to Samsung and I said, hey, we want to try this. We're going to need some money to try it. Can we have some money for the production part of it? And then if you feel like you like the raw footage, you can give us money to finish it and do it the right way. So we ended up taking 2 second unit days to shoot the, we called it the cube farm sequence, which is the sequence where the squad is going through an office space, and there's all these cubicles, and they're being attacked from all over the place. And I went to our actors and I asked them to come on one of their day offs, and we shot the whole thing in one day. And of course, when you're shooting VR, you can't have any equipment on set, you can't have any crew on set, so you have to shoot it very differently. We did, and the rough footage looked amazing. And I sent it to Samsung, and they came back to me and said, we love this, we want to give you all the money to finish it, which was a 7-figure sum to do the visual effects and do it the right way. So it turned into this incredible promotion campaign where they ended up, you know, doing a massive thing at Comic-Con for us based on the Samsung VR. And it really was sort of for them the launch of their VR goggles and cameras, and it just sort of the timing of it all worked out. So again, right time, right place. And VR is still progressing and adapting to what we need, and I think it's never going to go away. But I'm curious as to if there's ever going to be more of a long form content version of VR. I just don't know, but that one, we just sort of had no idea what we were doing and went for it, and it worked out.
Thank you so much for your question, Myron. Up next, Dylan, Jermaine, Chris, Brian, Janetta. Dylan, you're up.
Thank you very much. Hi, Andy. I will be playing Dylan Brody for the remainder of this conversation. I'm wondering, sort of a two-part question. First of all, what is your current mandate? What sort of stuff are you looking for, particularly now that the whole landscape has changed and we don't know when we're getting back into production? And secondly, do you guys have a system open for receiving submissions during this weird, we all fired our agents, and then there was a pandemic, and now we can't even take meetings world where nobody has agents?
Yeah, our one of the reasons I love Atlas Entertainment is because we kind of do all types of movies. We have an Atlas Independent division where we do small films under $10 million. We do medium-sized films, sort of like American Hustle, and of course we do the big event films. So it allows us to play in a bunch of different sandboxes at the same time, which is, I think, unique in our town. I think a lot of people have their forte and they do those things very well, but it's oftentimes they don't branch outside of that. For us, because we're a company of producers, there's a few of us that produce for Atlas underneath Chuck, and everyone's sort of looking for different things. So for me personally, I'm attracted to things that I personally want to go see. I'm all over the map between action films and small dramas and comedies, and I'm all over the place. But to me, I feel like it's a film that I personally would want to go see. I'm obviously, I think a lot of us now are taking on a big responsibility, in my opinion, to make films that will enlighten people and enrich their minds, and I think that's really important. And I think Hollywood in general has a really big responsibility because so much of the world looks to us, in our content that we produce to inform their way of life and how they should be thinking and talking. And so it's a responsibility that we don't, that we do take very seriously. And so it's something that I'm looking for. In terms of submissions, we only take submissions from agents and management companies that we have a current working relationship with. It's really the only process that we read material for a number of reasons, obviously. But for us, the major agencies and management companies are the ones that primarily bring us projects.
Just before I turn the floor over to someone else, what a joy it is to hear somebody talking about the responsibility that we have in the entertainment industry to think about what we're saying as artists.
Oh, yeah.
That's just a joy to hear somebody saying. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Dylan, good to meet you, sir. Thanks for being here. Up
A
next.
joy to be here, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Up next, Jermaine, Chris, Brian, Janetta, then Tosh. Hey, Jermaine, are you there? Give me 1 second.
I wrote a joke about the Jacksons, but it was not Jermaine.
And Andy, thanks for taking the time out to do this with us and
Yeah, of course.
share your knowledge. I'm gonna get to the point, man. COVID-19 has been crazy this year. I'm here in Atlanta. I film primarily here in Atlanta. I only go to LA when I have to film. The impact that the coronavirus is having on productions across the board is crazy. How is it affecting what you guys were currently doing pre-shutdown, and what is it looking like for you guys going into 2021? Because I look at your IMDb, I see you got about 11 projects in the queue. What is that looking like for you?
It's changed things significantly, obviously, because the most important thing for me as a producer is, of course, the safety of everyone on a set that I'm responsible for.
Right.
So we would absolutely do nothing that we felt like was putting anyone in jeopardy. Safety is, of course, the utmost concern to us at all times. So, unfortunately, the situation that I feel like our country is in is that we're far behind other countries in their battle against COVID-19. And, it looks like the first film that we're going to get back into production that was one day away from starting before it went down was this Uncharted film. And one of the reasons that is because it's going to be in Berlin. You know, it's Germany. So Germany has they've got their shit together, for lack of a better word, and they've figured out a way to fight this virus in a meaningful way that has allowed us to feel comfortable that the safety protocols that are in place are going to keep our cast and crew safe. And you know, it's the unfortunate thing is that it's difficult to say when that's going to happen here domestically. You know, the numbers are continuing to go up. Things don't feel like they're getting safer. Oftentimes they feel like they're getting more dangerous here in this country at the moment, in terms of the fight against COVID-19. So, you know, we're just keeping a close eye on it, and all we could really do is, you know, the part of our jobs, which is developing films and get them ready to hopefully be at a financeable, greenlightable place for when we do come out of this domestically and when we do feel safe to make productions again. A lot of productions, you know, are ramping up, and the safety protocols that are in place are significant. They really are. You know, they're going to also require additional money to make movies because of the way in which we're going to have to shoot them to keep people safe. You know, probably additional days, because the days and the way they used to run your long days and how you would function with them a little bit different. Of course, insurance will be there. So it's all so incredibly new that we're all honestly in the process right now of figuring it out.
Figure it out.
So I think everyone is at a different stage. Obviously, we will figure it out, and as soon as we feel like it's safe and comfortable to be able to start shooting here domestically again, of course we will. But all we're doing for the most part on our side is all those films that are on our slate is we're just still having conversations with directors, with financiers. We're hoping to get everything to the places to the point we officially come out of this. We've got films ready to go, and we can jump back into production pretty quickly.
Thank you. Second part to the question. DC, man, you guys are killing it with the releases of like Wonder Woman 1984 and the Harley Quinn. What else do you guys that you can talk about is on your radar? Any other DC properties that you might be involved in?
I mean, right now, you know, it's for us, it's just the Suicide Squad film that James Gunn just wrote and directed. So that's in post-production right now. And then, of course, Wonder Woman 1984, which will come out later this year, hopefully. Outside of that, you know, there's a number of things sort of kicking around that we can't really talk about yet. But, you know, I love working in that space. It's those films are so fun to work on. They're very time-consuming, and they sort of take over your whole life when you're making them. But they're incredibly rewarding to see the kind of impact that they have. So we'll see. But right now for us, it's Wonder Woman 1984 and the Suicide Squad that James Gunn just did.
Thank you for your time, man.
Good to meet you, Jermaine. Nice to have you, man. Up next, we have Chris, Brian, Janetta, Tosh, Jordan with a Y. Chris, Brian, Janetta, Tosh, Jordan. Chris with a K.
Hey, Andy. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well. I am in LA, which I believe you are as well. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm out here in LA. I also am a film producer. I have 4 feature films that I've produced and distributed so far. And my question for you today is, how did you find your first project, American Hustle? And what came first? Was it the script? I mean, I know like today people are throwing you all kinds of things and you can't, you know, you've got more than you even want to look at. But when you first started out, where did you as a producer find your first film, and what came first? Was it the script or how did it come about?
Yeah, I mean, American Hustle was, it wasn't actually one that came to me. It was sort of the first project that I was put on at Atlas as a creative executive. So Richard Sockle, who's also a senior producer, he's the president of our company, and Charles Roven, who runs the company, it initially came to them. And on that one, Eric Singer, who wrote the initial draft for Sony, wrote a film that we had just finished called The International for Sony. And at that point, you know, the studio was hoping that that movie would be successful enough that The International would have a sequel. And, you know, although I loved the movie and I'm really proud of that film, it didn't financially make what would it normally, you know, need to make to have a sequel. So at that point, Eric already had a deal in place at the studio, and they came to him and said, you know, obviously we're not going to do a sequel, but is there something else you have in mind? And at that point, Eric came to us at Atlas and said, hey, I've always wanted to write this film about this ab scam scandal. That's an incredible story. So we pitched it to Sony, and they signed off and said, great, write the script. And then that one, you know, just had such a journey on it. It was one of those where it's the perfect example of never give up, because you'll eventually get there. We wrote the script. I think Eric did an incredible job. The script was amazing. The script also was turned in, I believe, in about 2009-ish, when at that point Sony was having some financial issues. And early in the year, they sort of raised their hand and said, we're out of money for the rest of the year. So they came to us and they said, this is a script that we love, but not a film that we're going to make. So unless you guys find a filmmaker that we're really excited about, we're probably not going to make this movie. So we went off and, of course, tried to find filmmakers. We did. We found Ben Affleck, who wanted to direct that film at that point. And we started to have conversations about the rewrite. Sony at that time was very excited about Ben as a director, as were we. And at that same time, his friend George Clooney called him and said he wanted him to direct this film called Argo, which was much further ahead in its process than we were with American Hustle at that time. Or at that time, it was called American Bullshit. Mm-hmm. And so he went off and did Argo. Then the film sat again for about 2 or 3 years. And we then, Chuck, who runs my company, had a long-standing relationship with David O. Russell from Three Kings. And David was looking for a film like that. So we sent him the original draft. He loved it. But again, at that time, Sony didn't want to spend the amount of money that was made. So we were given permission to take it out of Sony and brought it to Megan Ellison, who worked with us to put the cast together, to get the script in order with David. We then brought it back to Sony. They ended up co-financing the movie. So that was a long process. That was, I think, we started that process in early 2008, I believe, with the script, and then didn't end up finally shooting the movie, I think, until 2011, I think. So, it takes a while. Triple Frontier, which is a film that I just did, that process was 10 years by the time we ended up getting a script to the time we actually got to make the movie. So I don't know if that answers your question, but they all come in different ways. They're scripts that we find, or projects or ideas that were pitched that we sell to studios that for some reason doesn't get made at a studio. We got to take it out and go find financing. And, it's, as as a producer yourself, it's, you just got to get scrappy sometimes and try to figure out how to find the money.
And that leads me to my next question is, what is the hardest part in making film? For me, it's always finding the finance for the money. Does that ever get any easier as you climb the ladder, or?
It never does. It never, I mean, people think that because we're Atlas Entertainment, we make these big movies and we've had all the success, that they come to us with their movie and then we snap our fingers and the money's there and we go make them.
It just falls out of the sky.
Does not happen. We are just like independent producers like yourself and everywhere else around town. We're chasing money all the time. We're looking for financiers for studios every single day. It's part of, what we do a lot for most of our days is try to find money to make movies. So unfortunately that never gets easy. And I understand why. You're asking for a significant amount of money. And, let's be honest, investing in films it's like Vegas, right? It's essentially, high stakes gambling. Oftentimes it pays off, but oftentimes it doesn't.
Right. And
you're asking people to take significant financial risks, and that's never going to come easy. You're never going to be able to get people to give that to you.
Andy, thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much, Chris. Good to see you on here. We have Brian, Janetta, Tosh, Jordan, Nancy, Zam on deck. We have plenty more questions, and we'll try to get to all of them, folks. So thank you so much for your patience. Brian, Janetta, Tosh, Jordan, Nancy, Zam.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
I got to give you props on the dedication to the fellow cause, and I saw the ink on your arm too, so that's pretty cool, man.
Oh, thank you. I've been growing this is my quarantine beard that I have.
Yeah, this is mine. It's very thick, right? Production beards get long, but those are quarantine beards. Anyway. Yeah. But no, I'm not going to do the whole thing. Like, I've been here for 10 years. I worked I came out to be a talent rep originally, so worked representation, worked at some studio stuff. You remind me of my buddy Derek over at the Donners Company, kind of too, if you know him. But no, my question was kind of along the lines of diversity, equity, inclusion. So I'm a disabled veteran, so I'm very involved in the Veterans Affairs space, the disabled community, but all the areas of intersectionality. So gender, minority, LGBTQ, and so on. I'm very involved in all the studios, including Warner Brothers, for other diversity inclusion initiatives. We even had a whole huge conference last year on this that Warner Brothers put on with the stuff for just veterans or such. My question, though, is about some of these conversations don't always align always to the production companies and the producers or the other people that work on, the talent initiatives in front of the camera or the executive side or there's other folks. But what are some of the conversations you guys have had there at Atlas that combine with the Warner Brothers side or other major studios you've worked with, like, Netflix's initiatives for Triple Frontier, for example? How have those conversations connected with you guys internally? And then also, each company kind of has, 1, 2, 3 people, obviously Charles running the show too, but are there some people internally that are kind of like a little more subject matter expert on the D&I space, or, everyone's doing it, but, there's some folks that are a little more aligned to these things. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course. Are you talking specifically about diversity and inclusion? I mean, for me personally, it's an agenda item that's incredibly important, and it has been for a long time, and I think I talk about, us being film producers, we have a serious responsibility, in my opinion, to, not only make sure that there's the proper amount of inclusion and diversity in the films that we make, but that we preach that to others, and that it starts at the top, right? I mean, you have to be hiring, we as producers, we do the hiring. So if we're not going to be a part of a diversity conversation, in my opinion, then who is, right? Because it starts with us. So it's incredibly important to us. It's something that we think about on every film that we make. And it hasn't been, we're not one of those companies that just started thinking that way, over the past several weeks. We've been thinking that way for years at Atlas. It was part of, our initiative to make Wonder Woman originally, because we felt like, a female superhero hadn't had her due process at that point, and we really wanted to make that. So in our films, it's incredibly important. It's something that is always a conversation at the beginning of the process, not at the end, trying to sort of backpedal to try to figure out a way to make it work at that point. It's always important for us to start it at the beginning. And it's something that we wholeheartedly believe in and take it as a serious responsibility as producers to make sure that we do our part.
Cool. And then you guys combine those conversations with the studios and networks, and you put your heads together on these best practices.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every studio, it's very important to every studio. And because we have relationships with all the studios, it's, as I said at the beginning of every project that we do, it's an initial conversation that we have, because if you're starting it from the beginning and you're not backpedaling to try to figure out a way to make it work at the end, it doesn't feel forced. There's a way to make it feel organic and to make it work. And if you start that process at the beginning, which is where you should, then I think, all of those things that you're doing in your films that you make will feel, they'll feel right, and I think especially, you being a veteran, I think I also take a big responsibility in how we represent the veteran community, which I think is also really important. Some of my favorite people that I've ever met in this business are the military advisors that work on our films. And, I think I would hope at least the 2 films that we worked with them on, which was the original Suicide Squad and Triple Frontier, I was, Kevin Vance, who was our senior military advisor on both of them, has become one of my closest friends. And it's important to me that we get that stuff right too. So, I think the only way you're going to get things right is to include people that you're telling stories about and that have lived that life and been a part of those worlds.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. We have Janetta, Jordan, Nancy, Zam, Ronnie, Andy. Janetta, Jordan, Nancy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm a super fan of American Hustle and David Russell films. So, yeah. I just wanted to ask, what's next on your list of goals? What's the next milestone for you?
It's hard to say. I want to just sort of be able to keep making movies. That's my goal every day, is to be able to, keep getting paid to do what I love to do. And I get to wake up every morning and have fun, playing in make-believe land and telling stories. I think, I've got a bunch of films on my slate that I've been trying to get off the ground for a long time. And so we've been taking, of course, some setbacks in the past few months in terms of the progress that we're making on those films. But I have a film at Sony called The Destroyer that I've been working on for a long time that we're getting very close on. And then a film called Barbarian about a character called Boudica, which is a script that's probably my favorite script that we've developed at Atlas since I've been there. It's a sort of a throwback to one of my favorite films of all time is Braveheart. And so it was one of the reasons why I got involved in that script, is because I've always wanted to make a movie like that. The character of Boudica, she's an incredible character, and she means a lot to a lot of people. So that script that we developed is a big priority for myself to try to get that off the ground in the next, hopefully within the next year.
Cool. Thank you. One more. And then for as far as like actors and casting, do you have any say in the casting process? And then if you do, what is it that makes an actor just stand out?
Yeah, I mean, we're really involved. We're involved in the casting of all of our films. We usually are the ones that will create the lists of people that we feel like is right. And then of course, get the studio's feedback on those and get a consensus from them who they are excited about. And then we go out there and we're the ones that will reach out to the agents and start to have the conversations. We've been lucky enough to make a bunch of films with a lot of great actors that we've maintained good relationships with. So a lot of the times we have conversations with those people on a regular basis just to sort of understand what they're looking for and what they want to do. And we can go to them directly, which is also a great thing. So, these days, of course, it's, before, I would say up until about 5 or 6 years ago, it was all about international value in terms of the actors that you can cast for your films. It was sort of all based on this model called the foreign sales model, which essentially took into consideration the amount of box office business behind those actors and films that they were the leads in. And then they can go out and sell those actors for films all around the world. I think now that you've got the streaming world that's happening and box office isn't as important, it's allowing us to think more outside the box in terms of who we can put as lead roles in our films. And yes, of course, star power is always going to be important, but we try to sort of come from a place of, talent is really sort of the most important thing for us. And so even if someone may not have the biggest name, but they're the perfect person for the role, it's always our goal to sort of push that agenda, especially when you're talking about the streamers that don't rely so heavily on box office business. Yeah. So, but I do think that star power will always be a thing. And in order to make a big, expensive theatrical film, you're going to have, a big name as the person that film is going to be sitting on their shoulders,
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Janetta, first time with us. So thank you so much for being here. Andy, you still good on time?
Yeah, I've actually, I've got, a lot about another half an hour. If you
Okay, great. Fantastic. That's all we need. Up next, Jordan, Nancy, Zam. Hey, Jordan, you there?
Hey, guys. Can you see me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Okay. No, it's fine. It's good to see you again, Ermin. It's been a minute. Great to meet you, Andy. I just had a quick question. I don't know if you have produced independent films or not, but do you prefer independence versus these big box office? Or have you, I guess it's the personal preference, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I have produced a few smaller films, like under $5 million. And I will say I love making those kind of movies. When you're making it, but when I often tell people making a $5 million movie is much harder than making a $200 million movie. Obviously, for a number of reasons. When you have problems on big movies, you can usually spend money to fix those problems. On smaller films, it's up to you to get creative to fix those problems as a producer. So they just they're very different in terms of when you're making a smaller film like that and you don't have a studio behind you. The creative freedom that you have is pretty incredible. You don't have these bosses at the studio level telling you what you can and can't do, and you can go make a great film oftentimes. So I love that process. The problem with that often is that unless you're making, it's very hard as a producer to make a good living doing those if you're not making a bunch of them. Because as producers, we only physically get paid as producers once we're starting to shoot a movie. So we can sell scripts and get movies financed, but until those movies go into hard prep and actual production, producers actually don't start making money yet. And so as a producer, if you really want to be able, it's just that when you're making films like that, it's just a hard way to survive as an independent producer, unless you have a number of them going at one time. So of course, best of both worlds is be able to play in both sandboxes if you can. And there's really no reason why you shouldn't be able to. I think, of course, certain films will lend themselves to the independent model just based on what they are. But again, we're living in a world where companies like HBO Max and Netflix and Amazon are making films that were before considered independent films that studios would have never made. So you now get the benefit of having a big studio behind you when you get to make, you know, a small intimate film that would have never been made at a studio level before. So I think the cross-pollination between those types of things now has been an amazing thing to see in our business, and it's allowing a lot of films to get made that would have never gotten made before. So they're just really different. But in my opinion, the skill set as a producer is very similar.
Understood. And then just one more quick question. I know you guys have a ton of say, like you said, in who you do decide to cast. Would you say a college degree would hold more or less weight over someone who has networked efficiently, has the right connections? What are your thoughts on that?
This is just my opinion, and it's controversial, but I don't believe a college degree means much in our business. It just, you know, having a network of people that know you, that know how you work, that you've known for a long time, that can trust you, is going to take you further in this business than a fancy degree at a very expensive university. You know, there are lots that you can get from a fancy degree at an expensive university, and I'm not telling people not to do that, because you absolutely should do that if that's your path. And oftentimes what the best benefit that you're going to get out of that coming into the film business is creating a network of people that you knew in college that you could then work with in the real world in the business. Often also gives you a, you know, understanding of how things are done on a film set or in a student film level, but that's such a different world than the real world. So I always tell people that the most important thing to you as a producer or anything in the business is going to be your network.
Awesome. I appreciate your time. Good to meet you.
You too.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Good to see you. Up next, Nancy, Zam, Rodney, Andy. Nancy, you're up.
Hey, hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, Andy. Thank you so much for doing this.
Of course.
And well, my question, someone got my question earlier about submissions and stuff for what's going on now with agents and WGA, but I wanted to know how much consideration do you guys put into things like contests, especially things like diversity contests or some of the bigger name contests versus smaller contests when you're looking for work, if you're not getting them from, if you're not getting scripts from agents or managers?
Yeah, you know, we put a lot of attention into it. I mean, I would say at Atlas specifically, a majority of that comes from our junior executives and our creative executives that spend a lot of time, you know, reading contest winners. But oftentimes we usually get those scripts from, you know, lit reps, so either agents or managers. And they have the time and bandwidth to spend a lot more time doing that than we do. Obviously, we, you know, when we're making films, we don't have enough time to be able to sort of comb through all the contests like we should be. We do have staff at Atlas that do that, but I would say primarily they come from the managers and agents that are responsible for finding those voices and bringing them to us.
Okay. And also I wanted to know, for everybody, are you on Instagram so that we can follow you and keep in touch?
I am. I'm it's just my name at Andy
Okay.
Horwitz. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Great marketing, Andy. That's what's up. Easy name to find. We're gonna go with Zam, Rodney, Andy, Katie, G. Zam, you're up.
Thank you, Andy, for your time.
Yeah, of course.
I'm a great fan of your production company. I'm from India, work in Bollywood. I would like to know, as a new director, scriptwriter, and editor, how accessible Atlas Entertainment is.
You know, as I said, we're accessible, but we require all of our pitches and screenplay submissions to come through agents and managers. So I always encourage people to, it's obviously incredibly important to find an agent or manager in order to sort of break into Hollywood as a writer-director. So I always encourage people that once you find your agent or manager, to have them reach out to us on your behalf. That's always the best way to make sure you don't get one of those unsolicited email responses back from our HR company.
That's all.
Yeah, but like I said, we all of our submissions come from reps.
Okay.
Representation. Yeah.
So how we could connect with Atlas Entertainment as a newcomer to the industry? This is the only way you could suggest or advise for us?
At the moment, that's the primary way to get in, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for Andy for your kind time,
No
and
problem.
all the best for your new
Yeah.
future project as well.
Thanks, you as well.
Thank you so much, Zam. I like it, man. Brief question. Love it. Up next, we're going to do Rodney, Andy, KDG, Tosh. Rodney, you're up, sir.
Cool. Thank you so much, Armand. Hey, Andy. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to also say right at the top that I had the same experience that you did as far as thinking that everything's going to be easy right from the beginning. I started out as an actor, and I booked an episode of Homicide: Life on the Street right when I first started, like a 2-page co-star. And I was like, oh, this is easy. I'm gonna be a big movie star probably in about 5 years. And then I moved to Hollywood, and it's like suddenly things changed. So I totally get it. My question specifically for you is, I'm a writer producer. I'm pitching a couple of different series right now, and I've got a feature film in pre-production. One of my series is based on some real experiences back when I grew up, where I grew up in rural Eastern North Carolina. It's got a strong engine to drive the show. It deals with environmental contamination. So I've been looking at actors and directors that are interested in climate change to try to get to them, because obviously this show is going to float their boat because it's a personal issue. It's important to them. Well, it should be important to all of us. Obviously, it's probably the most important issue of all right now. But I've got a production company that's helping me right now to sort of prep my online pitch package, and they're going to help me try to get to this one ginormous showrunner. But of course, that may not work out. He's super busy and super big, and if he loves it, great. That would be wonderful. But if he doesn't, I've got to find somebody of note to either an executive president of a production company or a showrunner. So how do I get on the map with them? Because my show's very commercial, and I think it's very important. The issues that we're talking about, I know it will be successful, but I got to get somebody with gravitas to help me push it along.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, there's a number of ways to get your material in the right hands. I always tell people that if, the material will usually speak for itself. And oftentimes it's, as I said, right time, right place. And so good material that people love in town gets to the right place when it needs to oftentimes. And, but it's difficult because especially right now, people think and assume that COVID, everyone's home, everyone should be reading and finding new projects. And that's not the case. People are very distracted with what's happening in the world right now. It's very difficult to get timely reads on your material, to get directors to read projects, to get showrunners to read projects. We have challenges as well, getting directors even to read stuff that we send as well, just based on, more important distractions happening in the world than reading scripts oftentimes for people.
Right.
And I completely understand that. So, I would just say to continue to have the production company you're working with reach out to these people's agents, get them to read the material, get other agents to read the material, just get as many people to read whatever you have as humanly possible. And hopefully, eventually it strikes a chord with someone and makes its way to the person you want it to. But you just got to keep banging on the door. That's really what you got to keep doing.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm banging on the door every single day. Yeah. So anyway, thank you very much. I think my friend is actually working with you guys right now. Kelly, I don't know if you're working with Kelly Madison.
Do you know which project it is?
It's called Rabbit.
I'm not sure. I mean, there's so many. We got a lot.
I know. You have a lot, yeah. But anyway, she just told me. I believe it was Atlas that she said that now she's partnering with you and she's pitching around town. So anyway, she's super happy with the collaboration. So anyway, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Rodney. We have Andy, KDG, Tosh, Linda next. We're still good on time, Andy?
Yeah, we're fine. Yeah.
Awesome. Andy, meet Andy. I hope I'm saying it right. ANDE. Andy, meet Andy. Hey, 1 second. Hey, Andy, can you hear us? On day. Williams? We'll go back to Andy. Let's go with Katie, Tosh, then Linda.
KDG?
Yes.
Okay, cool. um, so my question actually kind of ties into something that you talked about earlier, that you guys are going to be shooting in Berlin. So I actually am an American, but I live in Germany. And I was wondering kind of just some thoughts on international talent and how everything with COVID-19 will affect the way that you hire both actors and production teams for things that happen abroad and in the US.
In terms of international talent, we're of course, when we're shooting abroad, it's a priority for us to always hire wherever we're shooting as much as we can. We try to bring as few people as possible when we're shooting in places all over the world. So there's a number of reasons, obviously, for that, both financially and also because the talent pool is often very good. Especially in Germany, there's a really massive talent pool out there, and they've got incredible crew and cast. So for us, I don't know if this answers your question, but it is definitely always a priority to hire and cast locally as much as we can. And if for some reason we can't find the right person after exhausting all of our efforts, we'll of course look outside of the local community that we're shooting in, but it's always our goal to cast locally and hire locally if we can. And that's probably not going to change. COVID won't have anything to do to change that.
All right, thank you so much, Katie, for your question. Up next, we have Andy back. Andy, Tosh, Linda, Andrew. Andy, you're up. Hey, Andy, can you hear us?
There's some internet issues.
No worries, we'll try again. Let's go with Tosh, Linda, Andrew.
Yo, it's poppin', Andy. How you doing, bro?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm chilling. So I'm in New York right now, and right now it looks like Gotham City after Bane shut it down. So it's crazy. But so my question for you is, so you've done a lot of work with Charles. He was in his office, seeing all his emails and everything. What's the number one thing that you learned from him?
Number one thing I've learned. I would say as a producer, the number one thing you learn as a producer is to always protect the movie. The movie is always the most important thing, above all else, right? So oftentimes you're dealing with lots of different personalities on sets, lots of egos, being able to balance all of that together, meaning that between the creative, the ego between everyone that's there, all the different personalities, and always focusing on what the most important thing is, which is protecting the movie as a producer. So making sure that all of these decisions that you make, whether it be creative or interpersonal decisions that you make with people, having that movie that's sort of always on your priority list is number one. For me, it's something that I've never forgotten and have to continue to remind myself oftentimes when dealing with pretty crazy scenarios on films.
All right, hey yo, appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
Keep doing your thing, and we will be on the lookout for all the films you put out.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Tosh. Up next, Linda, Andrew B, then Jean. Linda, Andrew B, Jean.
There we go. Hey.
Hi there.
So real quick, American Hustle, what was your favorite moment during the pre-production and all that and going through film to the end post? And then are you filming any films? I'm in Atlanta as well. Are you coming to Atlanta anytime soon?
I'll start with the second question. I would love to come there. Atlanta's got an incredible crew base. Production there is amazing. We did shoot some of our Suicide Squad film there. So we love it there. And we, of course, can't wait to come back. As soon as it's safe and we've got the right project to come back there, we will. On American Hustle, I would say my most memorable moment that I continue to think about daily is there's a scene at the very beginning of the movie where Christian Bale is essentially putting himself together. And he's in the mirror and he's gluing his head and he's putting his hair together. And if you think about thematically what the film was about, that's really the essence of the movie, right? The movie is about people that have to put on a disguise in order to live their life successfully. It's about all of us. We all do that on a daily basis by doing our hair or wearing certain things. It's something that we unconsciously do all the time. So opening the film that way and realizing that that's really what the movie is about. It's about people that are sort of living, having to disguise themselves in order to be successful in their lives. But we spent, or our hair and makeup people spent a lot of time teaching Christian how to do that, because that's a process. That's a long process. And right after that, there's a scene where he runs in and Bradley Cooper messes up his hair. And that wasn't scripted and that wasn't planned. And Bradley did that because he knew how hard it was for Christian to get that look right. And as we were all sitting in Video Village watching that moment where he messed his hair up, we had to do it again because everyone started laughing because none of us expected it. And it was such an incredible moment because you could see the look on Christian's face. He doesn't even break character, like he just plays it so well.
Yes.
And it's at that moment, and that was sort of towards the beginning of our schedule, where you realize the incredible talent level of the people we were working with and just how much they understood these characters. So that day, that was all the same day. So the same day that Christian learned how to do that, and we shot that scene of him putting himself together and Bradley messing it up, was probably one of the more memorable days on that set for sure.
I will say, I'm also, aside from a filmmaker, an actor. So yes, being able to just stay in character like that and the camera just continues to roll, because the way that he reacted was just amazing. And to be able to see, you're saying another take of that is.
Oh yeah, there was a laugh out loud moment on set many times. Definitely one I remember so well, like it was yesterday.
So just to piggyback on that, then when Bradley was getting his hair done, was that a similar kind of disguise type moment?
Yeah, I mean the curlers were a big thing, and that was something that David came up with. That wasn't in the script either. And the second we saw, there's a scene where you actually see Bradley wearing curlers in his hair. The second we saw that in the hair and makeup test, we knew that David's he's such a brilliant mind, and he comes up with things like that oftentimes don't feel like big details, but as it's something that obviously you're still talking about from the movie, and it's those little things that he comes up with that are so memorable and the film. So yes, but that was obviously not scripted as well, and it was something that David came up with, and Bradley and him loved the idea, and it just worked so well.
So kudos to hair and makeup all the way from Jeremy Renner to everyone's outfits. Hair and makeup was off the charts. So.
Thank you.
And your work was amazing. So
they did amazing. We had an amazing cast and crew on that film.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Yeah,
thank you so much, Linda. Up next, we have Andrew Belcher, and then we'll try Andy again, then Maria. Andrew, you're up.
Cool. Hi. How you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. A little bit hectic, but I think we'll make it through. My question, you mentioned earlier that Atlas expanded into management and representation. My question is to kind of help ease, or to prevent wasting of time rather. What do you typically expect from an individual who calls and inquires for representation? Because I know that there's a list of things, some writing sample stuff like that, but I'd rather not waste anyone's time, I believe, because time is precious and there's little of it.
I mean, it's, that's not my side of the business because I work in the production side, but I do know that, one of the most important things, especially if you want to be an actor or an actress, is to have stuff to show for yourself. Or if you want to be a writer, to have things that you've written. There's so many times where, people will have an audition tape and they'll send that and go, hey, do you want to represent me? And, I think to be able to have a number of different things for those representatives to look at that show that you can do a number of different things, whether it's acting or it's writing and directing. And so oftentimes people will write one script for the lit department and go, hey, I wrote a script, do you want to represent me? Well, they can't do anything with one script, right? And so you have to have a quiver of different types of things you've written. And so I always tell people that the most important thing is to have stuff to show for your skill set, right? To have stuff, even if it's shooting stuff at your house by yourself with you in it, just being able to get us stuff to watch or to read. And not just one thing, but a few things so we can get a really good flavor of what your style is and all of that kind of stuff is always so important. I think oftentimes people have one thing to look at or one thing to read, and that's just not enough for a representation to commit to represent someone based on that.
Yeah, and from all the research that I've done as well, I've seen it's really difficult to make money, quote unquote, when you're breaking a new artist in. And that's what I really want to try to avoid, is like to keep all of the variables at least to a minimum. But so multiple projects would be at the top of the list. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I always suggest too, for just starting on your career, I do believe it's more important to find a manager first, because a manager is someone that thinks long term. They don't think about how much money you can make them right away, which is often how agents think, because agents have come from more of a business-minded aspect to it, and managers come from more of a creative, long-term thinking mind to it. So, but that's totally right. Is that it does take time for you to start making someone money, and so if you're going to get them to want to invest their time in you, you have to obviously show that you've invested a lot of time in yourself as well.
Thank you so much, Andrew. We do have a few more, so let's try.
Awesome.
We're gonna try our best to get through them. Oh, sorry, Andrew. Up next, we're gonna try Andy again. Andy, Maria, Anna.
All right. Are we? Can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Yes, we got it.
Okay, all right, awesome. So I have kind of two questions here. The first one is, I'm an aspiring director, but I also want to be able to get experience. And right now the military has us living in Florida. So do you have any advice for people wanting to work either remotely or be able to fly in for work? Do they even look at people who are applying that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's all the time we do. The problem is that unless you're at a certain, skill set, they're obviously not going to pay for you to live wherever you need to live, to shoot wherever you need, wherever the production is. So 100%, I think the only time it becomes difficult is that, if we're shooting in certain states, usually we try to hire people to live in those states because there's a tax credit that comes back to us, meaning that all the money that we spend, we get a certain percentage of it back if we're hiring citizens or locals of that state. So usually if you're going to come work from a different state, you're going to want to know someone that knows your skill set, that is going to be able to convince the powers that be that they need to take a hit on not getting a tax credit on you because you're a resident of whatever state you're living in. But, I do have to imagine that there's some kind of production of some kind in Florida that you should always be on the lookout for. I think right now, obviously, they're having a hard time down there. That's always the hardest part, is that a lot of people want to, work in different states, and you have to take into account the tax credit that the production will be missing based on your pay, and also, you having to provide living for yourself there too.
Yeah. My second question is, my first thing is I'm a director. I love being able to direct my own indie stuff, but in order to progress into a bigger role, what roles on set would you suggest I apply for? Like assistant director kind of jobs, or what kind of jobs would set me up to be a good director in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I always say, production jobs aren't going to set you up the best for that. So assistant directors, even though they're called assistant directors, don't actually do any directing, right? Those are the guys that will create the schedule. They'll help run the set. They're essentially sort of the quote unquote underboss of the set, right? They're the ones that make sure everything's going smoothly. They're making sure everyone's on time, and they run the set. But ADs usually focus on production only. So it's a non-creative position. If, for you being a director, I would always suggest, the best place to work, honestly, is for a producer, because as a producer, you get to understand how movies are put together, which is a really important thing for directors to know, how movies are put together. And producers are involved not only in the creative aspect of developing scripts and casting movies and putting them together on the creative front, but we're also involved in the production side as well, and the post-production side, which is also another really important part of obviously directing as well. So, working as an assistant to a producer is always going to give you that skill set as long as they're a creative producer. Working with a writer, I would always suggest as a filmmaker to try to lean more towards the creative side of the business and not so much on the production side of the business. And eventually those will all come full circle, but it always starts with the creative.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That answers my question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much. Andy, can we do maybe 2 or 3? Can we fit
Yeah.
into everything?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We're going to go ahead and Maria, then Anna. Hey, Maria, you there? No worries. We can go back to her. Let's go with Anna next.
I'm here.
Oh, hey. Okay, let's go Maria, then Anna.
Okay. Can you guys see me?
No, but we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, Andy. Thank you so much. I'm coming back into the industry. I went to film school in Santa Monica, Baron Brown Studios. I'm back in the industry. I've had a bunch of hurdles, but we're here to stay. We're not moving. And family, basically, my whole family wants to be in the industry. So being a little bit older, I did have a manager before when the first time I was in LA. And so do you have movies coming up? Do you know if they have roles for someone who's maybe like a little bit older, like in their 40s, like, you know, late 30s, early 40s, that would be considered for your movies? And
yeah, I mean, you know, of course, it's just, you know, we've got lots of scripts that have, you know, roles from any number of ages, and you know, we do work with casting directors on those types of films. So I would always, you know, as someone that is breaking into the business as an actor and actress, I always would suggest you guys get on the radars of casting directors if you can. Those are the people that are going to be bringing us, you know, the outside of the box ideas, the ones that aren't necessarily the bigger names. It's exactly how we found, as I mentioned, Karen Fukuhara earlier in Suicide Squad. You know, Mary Vernew, who cast that film, is the one that found her. So always important that you get on the radar.
I'm sorry, did you say Carrie Kukanada?
What's that? No, Karen Fukuhara.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I was a former NFL cheerleader. I cheered for the Rams. So when you said Carrie Kukanada, it was another former cheerleader. So I thought, sorry.
No, but yeah, I would say that, you know, like I said, the casting directors usually will get involved with us early on in the process, and for roles like that, I would suggest getting on their radars, because they're the ones that will bring, you know, producers like us to your attention.
I'm sorry, what was her name again? Or is there a way to contact them? Like, since I don't have my manager, it was a while ago. How can I?
Mean, we worked with Mary Vernew, but there's a ton of casting directors in town that are really talented. We work with a number of them. We work with Mary a lot, but you know, there's a number of them. I would suggest on getting as many of their radars as you can.
Okay, what's her last name, Mary?
Vernew.
Vernew. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
We love your movies, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you.
We're gonna go ahead and do let's go ahead and do Anna and then Danny, and everyone else, please feel free to email me the questions and I'll get them to Andy and we'll get to you as soon as possible. So let's go ahead and do Anna, then Danny.
Am I on?
Here we go. Yes, ma'am.
I'm muted. Okay.
You're good.
Awesome. Thank you, Erman, for putting this on, and thank you, Andy, for your time.
Yeah.
One of my questions would be, if you could go back in time and give yourself advice, what would that be?
I would tell myself to remember that Hollywood is a roller coaster ride and to hold on tight, because, you know, one of the things I always tell people is Hollywood is extreme highs followed by extreme lows, and the people that are successful in this business are the ones that know how to navigate those lows and remind themselves that eventually you'll get back to that point where you get to those highs. And then when you're at that great point where you achieve something amazing and everything's going really well, to remind yourself that it's not always going to be like this. You're eventually going to be back down there in that low again. And when you are, remember this moment of how good it can be. And so Hollywood is always like this, right? You're always constantly like this, no matter what level you're at, between, you know, Steven Spielberg or someone just starting out. You're going to be going through extreme highs and lows regardless of what level you are. And it's always going to be a struggle. It never gets easy. This business never gets easy. So, you know, I always have to remind myself that on a daily basis. Yes, things are hard right now. things aren't happening the way I want them to happen. I'm not getting to where I want to be on this project, or I haven't made any progress on it. People are passing on this script that we're sending around. No one wants to finance it. You know, as we always say, all it takes is just one, right? So you can have 75 people pass on your script. 75 people don't believe in it, but one does, and that's all it takes, you know. And we just had a situation where, you know, we took out a project to try to sell it all over town. Everyone passed, and, you know, we just decided, you know, we're going to take a flyer on a new buyer, and sure enough, that buyer bought it. So, you know, it was just one of those situations where you just have to remind yourself, all it takes is just one. And Hollywood is a roller coaster ride, so just hold on tight and just know that you're going to constantly be going like this no matter what level you're at.
Awesome. Yeah, nothing worth having in life is easy, so that makes
exactly
a lot of
right.
sense. And one more though, so if somebody wanted to play a superhero in a movie, what do you look for in the actor as a producer?
Superheroes are tough, you know. I think, of course, it's a hard one. I think to say, depending on who the superhero is. You know, personally, me, I would look to find somebody that embodies the spirit of who that character is on the page. You know, someone that is a good role model. You know, a lot of superhero kids look up to superheroes, so you would want somebody to be playing those roles that kids can look up to in real life as well, and not just look up to the fake version of them on screen. So, you know, we take a lot into account these days before we cast those roles, and it's really important that you are, you know, finding the right person for the right role that really sort of embodies the spirit of why that character was created in the first place.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it was great talking to you. Yeah, that was great.
Thank you so much, Anna. Good to finally see you.
Soon. Likewise, thank you. Talk to you soon.
Last but not least, Danny. Danny, how are you doing today? Hey, Danny, can you hear me?
Hey, Emin.
Here we go.
Thank you for sending me the link. I only just, was having breakfast and everything. Hey, Andy, how you going?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Congratulations on all of your productions.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, I'm not an actor or like in the film industry, but I'm on the music side. I was just wondering, I'm a composer, songwriter. Do you guys accept music submissions, or do you usually go through sync companies or labels?
We usually go through labels, or, you know, there's a lot of really good music agents in town. You know, there's agents that specifically represent composers or music creators. And I think we usually look to our music supervisors to suggest, you know, songs and needle drops to put in films. But in terms of when the composers that we hire, those come from agents that we have working relationships with that represent young composers or obviously seasoned composers. It's part of the business that I love the music process on our movies. You know, I think if you look at the films that I've done, there's a big musical element to a lot of them. I think music is so incredibly important, and it's something that people don't realize how important a score is to a movie to make you feel certain things. And you know, if the score doesn't work, the movie doesn't work, in my opinion, which people don't realize. So it's a part of the business that we have a big focus on at Atlas. And if you, like I said, if you look at the films from, you know, even Triple Frontier to American Hustle to Suicide Squad, music is a big part of all those movies. And you know, music drives emotion, and emotion, of course, is what you're always going to want in your films.
Cool. So you never do freelance submissions for like particular theme songs, or say you need a song typically written?
We don't, but music supervisors that we work with do. You know, and that's part of the reason why we hire music supervisors, because they're the ones that bring us songs like that we would have never found. And they're a very, very important part of the post-production process of the films.
Cool. I'll have to look into that. Thanks, Andy. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Danny. Annie, you've been with us for 90+ minutes, so thank you so much for your time today, sir. You're a trooper. Thank you so much for reconnecting with me and doing this for charity. Of course, everybody, once again, please check out EJI.org for the Equal Justice Initiative, and then check out Innocence Project at innocenceproject.org. Till next time, Andy.
Yeah.
See you again, man. And everyone else, don't forget, you can stick around for more networking.
Yeah, and thank you guys for having me, and thank you everyone for paying for this event for charity. It was super important to me, and you know, keep on keeping on, guys. Don't give up on your dreams, and eventually I know you'll all get there.